On his website, davidallentracy.com, it says, "You want the world to know who you are, but do you know who you really are?" As a personal brand coach, David Allen Tracy has coached hundreds of clients from entrepreneurs to models and entertainers. We not only get a glimpse into this aspect of David's life, but we also see the adventure side and how growing up in Panama and overcoming 2 bouts of cancer has shaped who David is. Get ready to discover yourself by discovering David Allen Tracy. Welcome to Journey with Jake. This is a podcast about adventure and how through our adventures we can overcome the challenges of life that come our way. While I expect you will learn some things about different adventures, this show will entertain you. Each episode will feature a different guest or guests as they share experiences and stories from the different adventures they have been on. Not only will you be entertained, but you will also hear the failures and trials each guest faces and what they have done or are doing to overcome the hardships that come their way. My goal is to take each of us on a journey through the experiences of my guests with the hope that you'll be entertained and inspired to overcome your day-to-day challenges. After all, it's not all about the destination as it is about the journey. Welcome back to another episode. My name is Jake Bushman, and I am the host of Journey with Jake. We are on episode 116 today, and before we jump into my conversation with David Allen Tracy, please remember to subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. That way you don't miss an episode. I also invite you to follow me on Instagram at Journey with Jake Podcast. This is a great way to see some clips from the show and a preview of what is coming out in the week. It is also my personal space that allows me to share some of my personality with all of you, so check it out. Also, if you like to watch these episodes, I am now featuring all of my shows on YouTube, so search for Journey with Jake Podcast on YouTube. I am so fortunate to have this opportunity to speak with such amazing people each and every week. I was once again blessed as I had the chance to speak with David Allen Tracy. David is a personal brand coach and has so much to offer. We get to hear some of his adventures growing up in Panama, but we also dive into his coaching and what is involved with that. Okay, let's get to my conversation with personal brand coach and adventurer, David Allen Tracy. I'm excited today because I have David Allen Tracy on the show with me. David, welcome to Journey with Jake.
Jake, thanks for having me on. I'm excited.
I'm excited too. This is going to be fun. You're someone who is a personal brand coach. That's kind of who you are when people look you up on the internet, that sort of thing. That's who they'll find. This is an adventure type podcast. I know you have some adventurous background and things like that. I do want to dive into the personal brand stuff because I think that's important for everybody, for me in particular. So I'm sure I'm going to gain a lot of great information today. It's going to be awesome for me. So before we get rolling into all of that, give us a little background, where you're from, where you grew up, that sort of thing, and we'll kind of go from there.
Absolutely. Well, I was drawn to your podcast when I saw you on Instagram. So you're obviously doing something good. Like your brand is standing out. I loved the adventure component of how you talk about that on your podcast and the type of guest you have on. My whole childhood and young adult years were full of adventure. And I would say my life is an adventure now in a very different way. I was born in Wisconsin. I didn't grow up there. My parents went into nonprofit work when I was about 5 years old. And from that point forward, we lived in Canada, then Mexico, then Guatemala, then Panama. And so I grew up in Panama most of my life. For 25 years, I lived there. So although I am, a white guy born in Wisconsin, my heart, my soul is very Latino. I speak Spanish fluently. And I grew up amongst indigenous tribes as well, in the jungle. So we lived in very rural parts of Panama, in the interior, in the colonial towns. And then we lived along the outskirts of Panama City, bordering the jungles. And we would regularly go to the jungle to provide healthcare for indigenous tribes, to do community development, to provide education for kids, because basically in a lot of these villages, the kids wouldn't get more than like a 5th or 6th grade education. And even that was more like a 3rd to 2nd grade level of quality of education. So many of them would end up stuck in this constant cycle of poverty. And generationally, that would keep on going. And the girls would oftentimes be pregnant by the time they're 13. And the parents wanted them to have an education while retaining their language, while retaining their culture. that was really hard to do outside of my parents starting a boarding school, because basically if you send them off to a normal school, they're going to lose their language and their culture. So they started a boarding school for indigenous kids, and there are 7 different indigenous tribes in Panama with 7 distinct types of languages and cultures. We had them on our campus. It was so much fun, like so much fun. These were my friends growing up. And so absolutely love the indigenous tribes of Panama, all of them, but I'm especially bonded to the Imbara culture. And they live deep in the rainforest. It looks like when you go in these deep dugout canoes with the canopy rainforest, and there's caimans in the water and kingfishers and howler monkeys in the distance, and just the highest trees you could ever imagine. Dense rainforest with vines swinging. And my brother and I, as kids, I remember wandering through the jungle, and it would be downpouring rain and the muddy slopes, and we'd be sliding down the slopes into the river and climbing trees and jumping into the river and climbing waterfalls, and just all kinds of stuff like that. It was really absolutely memorable. And then, of course, as I grew up, I myself did nonprofit work as well, and I've traveled to over 40 countries. So, seen a lot of things, done a lot of things in every continent except for Antarctica, and have had a lot of really unique experiences and a lot of stories. I remember specifically a lot of different things as it pertains to Panama in particular, where we would work specifically with the Air Force Navy of Panama. It's a police department. They don't actually have a military. And, there were certain villages that were bordering the border of Colombia. And so it's a dangerous area. We have the guerrillas there, and a lot of kidnapping would happen, and, guerrilla warfare, and, smuggling of drugs, and and people, lots of not good stuff. And so we had to be in and out. And so to do medical care and stuff like that. So I flew in by helicopter to these villages with this police force, did the work we needed to do, and then flew out. In other situations, we'd bring medical brigades to rural towns on the central part of Panama, where there was no road access. The only way you could access it was by boat for like a half a day from a port city called Colon, or by helicopter. And so we flew in by helicopter with all the food for the week for like 70 people. And I cook over a wood fire for everyone, and, bring everything you could in coolers and all the things. And we do the medical care. And it would be sometimes we'd literally see lives saved. People who would have died just from basic things like dysentery or infected wounds and other things like that. So it's I had lots of experiences along those lines. I think on the other side of it was situations where I've led teams and volunteer groups to earthquake zones like Haiti. In 2010, I led a group of a whole team for, I forget how long, almost a month, to Haiti just after the earthquake. And that was really, you can imagine, very devastating. A lot of turmoil, Haiti's is the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere anyway. And then on top of that, they had the earthquake. So there's a lot of poverty, a lot of loss, both of human lives, but also of property and possessions. There's a lot of chaos, and people were at their lowest place that they could be. We were living in a tent village. There was no running water. So we had to literally filter water out of the dirty ditch into this whole high-tech filtration system, which I was like, this can't possibly work, but it did. And, there was tons of domestic violence and lots of intervention we had to do, a lot of chaos. It was crazy, absolutely crazy. And the biggest thing I noticed during that time in Haiti was how quickly people can be dehumanized and lose their sense of dignity when they're scavenging for what they can get, and they're hungry and they're desperate and they've lost everything. I saw, grown women beat children that weren't theirs with, and all kinds of violent activity that shouldn't have happened. But that's where the human condition was in that moment. And so we would do fun things. Like, I remember getting everybody was hungry. We'd been eating rice and beans like every day for several weeks, and one of my backgrounds of the many things I've done in my life is I'm a certified chef. I went to culinary school back in the day, and so of all things, and so I'm like, I need to feed these people, the whole village and also the volunteers and the students. So I went down to St. Mark in Haiti, and I found this, I don't even know, contraband chicken that was frozen and in these huge boxes that was supposed to go to the grocery store, like wholesale. And I was able to buy it off the truck, and got some barbecue ingredients, and I found a whole bunch of fettuccine pasta, and I found some, of all things, heavy cream. And I found Parmesan in another store, and I'm like, oh, and I had this huge cauldron. So I made a huge pot of pasta, and then fettuccine sauce and Alfredo sauce for fettuccine. And then we had rebar that we took, 25-foot long pieces of rebar along with these brick blocks that we put out. And I made this huge long fire, like a biggest barbecue ever. And I had about 10 guys helping me rotate the chicken. And we fed the entire village and all the volunteers, like 100 something people. And we ate really good that night. It was a huge morale booster for everyone. So
Wow.
it's stuff like that. There were many other stories, funny ones too. And I lived in the Middle East for about 6 months as well. The more you travel, the more you see, the more you realize how small you are in a way,
Right. Yeah.
but also how even the smallest thing we can do for someone that has need can be a huge deal. That we're just a flight away from making a difference in a village, that has no running water.
Absolutely.
We're just a short flight away from building a home for someone who is living on the streets. So there's so much we can do, and that was really my life for many, many, many years, up until I hit 30.
Wow. So yeah, talk adventure. Yeah, you check the box for sure. Just with your childhood, you're talking about seeing waterfalls and going down muddy hills and things like that. So you said a brother. Do you have any other siblings, or is it just a brother?
So I actually have a biological brother and a biological sister, both younger than me. And then we also had 2 foster girls that lived with us that were basically sisters. We grew up together. If we could have adopted them, we would have. There's a whole story with both of those girls. And one of the girls is indigenous. Her name is
Okay.
Esther. She came to us was brought to us by her mother. Her mother was 13 when she had her.
Wow.
And basically her mother was unable to care for her. And so when she was about 15 days old, they asked if my parents could care for her. And we tried helping her care for her, but she was young, really young.
13.
So we started out just kind of, we'll take her for a while and we'll help, because the baby was not going to be okay, basically. And so as time progressed, the mother wanted to prioritize her education and all the things. And so Esther we named her actually, and all the things. And Esther was a member of our family, and she lived with us for about 5 years. And I took care of her a lot of the time. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself a little bit in the sense that around this time, just prior to getting Esther, I was diagnosed with cancer. And so I was very sick for about a year, and recovery period after that. Went through chemotherapy and the whole night in Panama.
How old
And
were you?
I was 14.
14.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So it was that rocked my world,
For
if you can
sure.
imagine. So that was very eye-opening. It was an adventure of a different kind. I couldn't go to school, stayed home, went to the hospital almost daily, frankly, for some sort of test or something. When you're young and you're faced with that reality, when you're faced with the reality that you're sick, that you could die at that young age, it really sobers you up to realize like what matters in life, And I had other kids that were going through chemo in the oncology. One of them's name was Oliver. He had a brain tumor. He was blind, about 5 years old, and he would sit in my lap and he would receive his chemo, and we bonded. And then he one day wasn't there anymore. It's gone. And it was so sad to hear the news. And when you're 14 and you see, a child dies, it's it wakes you up. It wakes you up. And
Yeah.
so
14-year-old. I mean, because I'm trying to think back when I was 14 and just kind of things that were important to me was taking naps and, watching sports and, those kind of things. When you're seeing something like that, that's like real life happening right in front of you. How did that affect you think?
Well, it affected me in a lot of ways. I think for one, there were many, many, many things. Number one, I'm thankful for life. Number one. Number two, I don't want to waste my time. I don't want to waste my life because we're not guaranteed anything in this world, in this life that we get. We don't know how long we're going to live. We don't know how many years we're going to have. I think I've lived 13,500 days at this point.
Nice. You've counted your days. I like that.
You just never know how, and if you live to be 95, you'll live like, what is it, 34,000 years, or 34,000 days. So it's not that many days we get. And so it made me think that way, which is why I did a lot of things in my life, because I want to make a difference. When you look at that perspective of making every day count, it goes beyond yourself. It goes to what can you leave behind? What can you contribute for your children? I have 4 daughters, and my wife and I have raised 4 daughters. Our youngest is going to be 7 this Sunday, and my oldest is 14 next week. It's very puts into perspective. What are you leaving behind for them? But not only for them, but anybody that's put in your path, anybody that your neighbor, your community, your city, your country. But beyond that, we hear needs around the world, and we get desensitized to them. We become almost like, is that even real? Because there's so much false information and so much media. When I've seen young people or people of all ages travel and spend time abroad, volunteering or going through a maybe exchange student program or whatever it is, you become aware of not only the needs in that country and your gift sets and what you can contribute, but you also become succinctly aware of the needs in your own country. Mm-hmm. It completely changes the perspective. So that was one of the things that happened for me when I had that cancer. The other thing it really gave me, though, was a lot of creativity, because I had a lot of downtime receiving treatment, going through CAT scans and laying in bed sick. I had so many ideas. Hundreds of ideas come to my mind for like books and like business ideas and like things I wanted to do. And I've done so many of them already. Because I think that when you're young, and this isn't just young people, I guess nowadays, so many of us, we're distracted. We're busy on our devices. We're doing our thing. How much time do I spend on this thing every day? Every day.
Yep.
And especially in my industry. And
right. Me too.
And it's kind of it's the way of life. But man, like relationships, people, taking a walk, going out and doing something fun in nature without your phone, without your device, you really just soaking it up. It makes a big difference. That was really key for me. And I think really tapping into what are my skill sets and what is my destiny and what am I able to contribute and do was the biggest thing. And so during that time, though, I had cancer and, was recovering from it. Then we got Esther in our life. So I'm recovering from having cancer, and I'm home a lot at this point. And I took care of her a lot when she was a little baby. And so I got this very kind of, I'm a, foster brother, but I had kind of a more bonding experience than that with her, because I would be home sometimes all day long with her, just me and her. And I'd feed her and change her diapers and all the things. And eventually when her mom turned 18, she had some advice given to her from someone in government saying you should take your daughter back, and the government let her take her daughter back. It was a very difficult situation because Esther only spoke English at that point.
Wow.
She was only 5 years old. She'd been with us since she was 15 days old. She only knew us as her family. And now all of a sudden she's living taken away with a person she doesn't know to the jungle in a village she'd never been to, with people who don't speak her language and are completely the opposite culturally, and very devastating for her. And we got reports of her crying and being, of course, I was thinking about my youngest Rose, who's 6, she was taken away and suddenly realized that we're not her family, or that she's not, how weird that would be. Now that was devastating. That was devastating for her, devastating for us. I don't condemn the mother for what she did. I get it. I do, but I don't. at the same time.
Yeah.
And so years later, though, kind of full circle, when she was 13, when Esther was 13, she ended up going to the boarding school and living with my parents until she graduated. So it came full circle. But there was a lot of, stuff that had to be worked out, obviously on her end as well from the trauma. So yeah, there's a lot of different things like that.
Wow. Okay. And I got to ask, because she came back full circle, went to the boarding school. How is she doing today? I mean, people
So
probably want to
she's
know this.
in university. She's trilingual. She speaks English, Spanish, and Embara. She is working at the nonprofit that my parents started. My parents aren't in Panama anymore, but she's still there. She's a wonderful, wonderful girl, and very dear to our hearts, and still part of the family.
Awesome.
So that's, yeah. And I also have in the process of being adopted, little brother. I would say I have more almost like an uncle relationship to him, because he's young. He's like my kid's age, but he's technically my brother. So, which is fun. And his name is Andy. We're a fun family. And my brother is a filmmaker. He lives in Hawaii. My sister works for as a university counselor, and she's in where is she at, North Carolina. My parents are currently in Norway, but they were living in Hawaii, but they're traveling in They travel all over the world, but they live in Wisconsin, and we live in Florida.
They're all over.
Yeah.
And you said you're married and you have 4 daughters.
Yes.
Good.
Yeah.
So I know after, Panama, you did all kinds of things. You went to, Haiti, and you had kind of your own nonprofit things, and in the meantime, you went to culinary school. So you've done a lot of cool things. How did you get into the whole personal brand coaching side of things?
Yeah, it's an interesting kind of turn of events. So I was living in Hawaii when I was 30, and I was working for a nonprofit there that provided, and I was working directly with a department that did a lot of innovative technology and literacy projects, and so fun. But I ended up getting diagnosed with cancer again for the second time. This time it was liver cancer. And I was different this time. The first time, when I was 14, I was under my parents' care. It was devastating and difficult, but I was young, maybe a little bit naive in a sense. I didn't have any responsibilities. This time I have 4 kids. At the time, my youngest was recently born at that point, and, I'm married, and I was suddenly aware that, what if I die? What if something, if I leave my wife a widow and my parents without their dad, and my kids without their dad? And it was very different. And I remember being like, not again, like, why, And I ended up, for long story short, and I ended up really getting angry about it. And not an anger where I was bitter and mad, but almost like a determined anger, where it was like, I'm not going to accept this. And I got people rallying around me. I was like, I'm going to fight this. People were praying for me. It was like, we just went for it. And of all the things, biopsies showed it was malignant. It was cancer, the whole thing. I went to Mayo Clinic in Minnesota, saw the best liver specialist you could ever get. They did more biopsy, 100%. It's malignant. It needs to be removed. We need to have surgery. So got the surgery. Biopsy was done. That was a rough surgery. I'll say that. Very rough. They removed the left lobe of my liver and my gallbladder, and it's a big surgery, and it took a long time to recover from. But interestingly enough, 4 days later, I was waiting for the results to get back, thinking, why aren't they getting back to me, from the biopsy? And 4 or 5 doctors come in, and they're like, David, we don't know what to tell you, but you had cancer, but now you don't. I'm like, what? They're like, you had cancer, but now you don't. And I'm like, what do you mean? And they're like, we can't explain it. You had it, and now you don't. And so a Mayo Clinic doctor called my dad up, he's connected to him as a friend, been to Panama several times actually, and said, hey, like, just so you know, they're not allowed to say this, but your son had a miracle. Like, literally, they can't prove what happened. Like, he had cancer, and now he doesn't. So that was really cool, and very, very, very thankful for that second lease on life. And with that then came a lot of transition and change, because again, when you have some traumatic or some difficulty things happen, you have a choice to make. I can go back to doing what I was doing, or I can transition. And I remember waking up from the surgery having this very distinct feeling, whether it was the drugs from the surgery or whether it was me or what. But I had this really clear thought in my head that I was done doing nonprofit work and that I was going to step into doing business. So many of the nonprofit ideas I had really weren't nonprofit ideas. They were all business ventures, because a lot of nonprofits struggle with sustainability and fundraising and volunteers, and I wanted to engage in all these other facets of community and life, and make a difference through the business sector. And so I ended up getting recruited shortly after that by a man who had a mobile app company based in Virginia. He asked me if I could take that mobile app company to Panama to get it kind of circulating around Latin America. So we did that for a while as his director of operations, marketed it like crazy. And that was what got me kind of into the marketing world. I had done some marketing light in the nonprofit world, but not to the level that I was doing here. He goes, "You're so good at marketing that we should start a marketing agency." So he started a marketing agency, and I was his director of marketing while being director of operations for the mobile app company. Did that for a season, and then we ended up leaving Panama and started our own marketing agency after transitioning out of that guy's company. And we did it based out of Des Moines, Iowa, of all places. But we wanted to have a season in which we were closer to my wife's family. They're all from the southwest corner of Minnesota and Iowa as well. So it was nice to be with them. We had our whole marriage. We'd lived closer to my family in Panama, so in Hawaii. Basically, we did that. Northgate, being who I am, my company, my marketing agency, Northgate, it became a global agency. I hired people that I'd met in the nonprofit world, and we could do marketing in 9 languages, and we had clients all over the world, and it was super fun. And we were helping a lot of nonprofits pro bono, and it was amazing. Our portfolio is massive. We did, I think I've done marketing consulting for over 400 businesses in the last 4 years. So I still own that marketing agency, and it's still going. I've transitioned, though, because as I was working with individuals and as it pertains to the personal branding component of it, so much of my favorite components when it comes to marketing is the whole element of storytelling and understanding what makes the owner or the team of the company tick, what makes them get up, what are the values, what's the story, what's the secret sauce, the it factor. So when we do branding for them, branding is beyond the branding kit and the logo. It's the narrative of all things as it funnels out into the community. And so it's the website, it's the tagline, it's the elevator pitch, it's the color schemes of the business cards, it's the culture, the corporate culture and it's so many things. And so when we would do branding consultations with our clients, I found a lot of times that it wasn't enough for us to create corporate branding. We had to help the owner with their own branding, because ultimately branding for a business entity is kind of a combination between the owners of the company and their personality, as well as their target market's personality and what's going to appeal to them. It's this kind of mixture between the two. So often, though, what happens in branding, and I think it's the wrong way to go about it, is typically what's looked at is what are other people doing, competitors, and there's this imitation that happens, which you can find strategies that might work and things, but is it really going to be authentic, and is it going to be compelling? And the most compelling brands out there are the ones that are truly, innately, authentically unique, and they are themselves. There's this authenticity to it that makes you go, I like that. That's different. And it's different because they're not copying someone else. They're being themselves.
Right.
And so we try to find out what are the differentiators and what makes them unique and highlight those components. Well, that's on the business side now, but there's a lot of people who would come to us who were keynote speakers, they're authors, podcast hosts, they're whatever they are. They're the one person doing, something that requires a greater level of influence, a greater level of exposure, both on the digital landscape as well as in general in the community at large. What do you do to draw people in so that they want to talk to you? What do you do when you go to a networking event? Or if you're a keynote speaker and you only have 15 minutes to present and there's like a lot of other speakers, what do you do to get all these engagements? How are you going to dress on stage? What are you going to lead with? What are you going to end with so that you're memorable? Who are you going to intentionally try to connect with at that networking event in order to glean opportunities? And what are you going to do when you meet up with them for the first time? And there's this whole personal branding, consumer psychology, identity element to it. So I began to kind of go, like this is a real thing. And I love it because I like one-on-one a lot more than corporate stuff. And I have experience in a lot of variety of things in the nonprofit world as well as in business. But in the nonprofit world, I organized events and retreats and conferences and international arts festivals and, worked with people from so many different types of cultures and volunteers from about every walk of life, whether they're multimillionaire people down to like, your blue collar workers, whoever it was. They all came in and they're all different, and you learn to adapt and to think. So when it comes to, I'm not a psychologist by any scope of the imagination. However, I kind of have this kind of intuitive ability to understand how people are wired and think, and then how their target market will. And so I went through kind of I'd say about 2 years ago, a transition to where I was getting tired of like, do I have to do one more SEO meeting? Do I have to do one more meeting about, an algorithm? Like, I'm so tired of the technical stuff. Let me get in. And so I went through a bit of a transition to where I thought, let's do this personal brand coach stuff. And so that was really the birth of that, which has in it all those components of the marketing strategy, the business consulting, the personal brand coaching, the personal styling. And then I also got certified in a modality of inner healing to help people overcome mindset trauma and things like that, because so many of my clients had that stuff get in the way from them being able to be authentic and to present themselves in a light where they could just have conversations like we're having right now. They'd stutter their words. They'd be afraid, of people and what are they going to judge me, or I'm going to make a mistake. So I got certified in this modality to help people overcome that stuff, which they don't have to do with me. They don't want to, but it's there if they want it. And I'll tell you about 99% of people do choose to do it with me. So,
well, 100%. I think that's important. And I like the fact that you're sharing that, because that was, a couple of questions as you were talking kind of came into my mind. And one was that, because I feel like even myself, I get in my own way sometimes with my negative self-talk and things like that. So talk to me about this. What is this? If you can dive into this healing a little bit more, just so you kind of understand, if you don't mind.
It sounds super woo-woo for those like watching and listening, but it's not. It's the theta healing is essentially healing through the theta brainwave. So it's the idea of we have different brainwaves. Okay, so we have like beta, alpha, gamma, theta, etc., and they're basically different frequencies that we have so the theta state, we all have it. Okay, so most of us have it. We're in the theta state when we're waking up from sleep, and we're aware that we're asleep, but we're also aware that we're waking up, and we can kind of drift between dream and awareness, pretty quickly. It's kind of fun when you can stay in that space for a while, because you can kind of manipulate your dreams a little bit and dream what you want.
I know what you're talking about. I've been there.
Yeah, it's fun. And you also can kind of have that when you're falling asleep, but it's usually easier when you're waking up, especially when you get to sleep in. Like when you get to have a long sleep, you get to have a lot of that. You can also have it when you're meditating, praying, eyes closed, laying still, when you're in that really rested space. You can have it sometimes when you're sitting out looking at a body of water and you're just staring into it. Some people experience it when they're driving long road trips and they don't remember most of the trip because they're so drifted in. Everything's in automatic pilot mode at that point. So it's essentially where the theta brainwave state is essentially where the subconscious mind is taking over more than the conscious mind. We tend to, throughout the day, operate more where we're driving the steering wheel. Our thoughts, our subconscious mind is more in the backdrop. It's doing its thing. Like right now, as I'm talking to you, I'm thinking about what I had for lunch and kind of like, that was good. I'm kind of hungry for supper, but I have another meeting after this one. And I'm like, that's all happening in the background. That's still kind of the conscious mind, but way in the back as I'm talking to you and we're talking Panama and we're talking Haiti and we're talking Hawaii. I'm having little memories of being on the beach or in the jungle or the old lady I met that one time. And And the mind goes in these 50 million directions, right? All at the same time. We are incredible in terms of the brain, how it's designed. So what I do is when we look at the realm of what trauma is, right? So trauma is a disruption to the pattern. So we have a pattern that's healthy, it's good, and then trauma comes in and it disrupts it. And we don't like that. We don't like disruptions. We don't like it at all. So what we try to do is we try to weave it into the tapestry of our of normalcy, so that it's just part of our life at that point. Because if we give it attention, the subconscious, the conscious mind does not want us paying attention to trauma. It doesn't. So it tries to say, avoid it, avoid it, avoid it. And so we will avoid it by dismissing it. We'll avoid it by hiding it and being afraid that it'll be exposed, or dealing with the pain. So we'll sweep it under the rug, we'll bury it away, we'll tuck it away, and we'll kind of dismiss it. And people dismiss trauma in different ways. Denial is one of it. Didn't happen, not a big deal. Sure, I was physically abused by my father when he was drunk. That was not my childhood, but just giving an example. That wasn't that big of a deal. He wasn't that bad. We try to protect ourselves from the realities we've been through. Or it could be, I'm never going to let this happen again. I'll never be hurt again. So I operate in this superiority mode where no one can ever hurt me again. So I put out a strong face up and I fight my way forward. Or it can be an inferiority complex, which is, I never want to be hurt again. So I'm going to hide and I'm going to blend in and to the wallpaper, and I don't want anyone to see me, so I never get hurt. And also, so I'm never exposed to how hurt I am. Or it can be a coping mechanism: alcohol, drugs, working, any type of addiction, or anything that takes the place to drown out your phone, anything to cope. And so there's many types of facets to it. So this is where the conscious mind goes. Put up the protector mode. You don't want that shame. You don't want that pain. We're afraid of it, so we control it. In one of those 4 ways I said earlier. So the theta healing component of it says, I'm going to go back, but rather than go against the grain, I want to see the woven pattern of your life, and I want to see it as I'm going to ask you 50 to 150 something questions throughout the 90-minute session. Your eyes are closed the entire time. You can be sitting or laying down. It's not hypnosis. It's none of that stuff. It's just literally you're just allowing yourself to be in a rested state. And rather than allow your conscious mind to dictate what you're going to say, if I ask you a question, I don't want you to think about it. I want you to say the first thing that comes to your mind when I say it. And that may be a color, it could be one word, it could be anger, it could be whatever it is. But I'm weaving through to find the source. It may be an image, it may be a cartoon you watch when you're a kid, it may be many, many things. It's hard to explain it without going through it.
Sure.
But ultimately what it does is when it's kind of like letting go of control of us controlling the narrative, and letting our emotion, or letting our, not so much the emotion, but letting the subconscious mind that has it all stored away. It's the memory bank. It remembers things that we tuck away and don't want to remember. So usually it takes a few sessions to get there, because it takes some practice for people to be willing to let go, essentially. But when we're asking questions, it doesn't take long. Literally, it's like, so what's the first thing that comes to your mind when I say your home? And they'll be like, safe. What's safe about it? My mom. Is there any part of it that's not safe? My dad. Why is your dad not safe? Angry. Why is he angry? Because he drinks. Why was he drinking? Because his dad beat him. Whatever, you get I'm making up a scenario. You start
winding through it, like you said,
wolf
through it.
And so we get down to the source of where the pattern is. And the whole point of it is essentially when we can find out, okay, where is this mindset coming from? So you don't feel safe around paternal figures or your CEO or the boss of your company, because he, I'm making stuff up right now real quick.
Sure, yeah.
But the idea is then we go, okay, let's reconfigure that memory by putting it in its place. What happened? What was real? What wasn't real? What was the negative belief that you borrowed or took on, that you wove into your pattern? And what can we replace it with in that moment? And usually there's some imagery we'll do and some things like that, and it weaves it and it changes patterns, and entire behaviors change. So I've seen clients of mine where afraid of doing things that aren't afraid of it anymore. And it's crazy. And then we'll work on it. Like I have clients who were very insecure about doing certain business ventures because they felt like they weren't going to be a good fit for it, or they were scared to get on stage in front of people or whatever it was. And we worked on this stuff first, a couple sessions, and all of a sudden they're like, you know what? I think I can do it now. And how many of us try to do something and we're insecure and then we self-sabotage later on after doing all the hard work?
Exactly. And you said it too. You said 95% of your clients want to have this therapy because, I mean, why is that? Are we all just have trauma? Like what's the
But
reason you think?
we live in a messed up world. We just do. There's a lot of stuff. I mean, every day, I'll turn on your news, you'll see it.
Yeah.
And right now, I guess we have such an oversaturation of information at our fingertips where we're carrying weight we shouldn't be carrying anyway. But beyond that, every human being has trauma. And I oftentimes try to tell people, just because you don't think it's trauma doesn't mean your body and your mind and your spirit doesn't think it's trauma. You might consciously say, "Oh, it's not trauma. That's normal." Well, it's normal to you, but it's not normal for the younger you. When you first experienced whatever it was that you experienced, that wasn't normal for you. You were in shock and you assimilated to it and it became your new normal. But let's go back there. We tend to, it's not so much the idea is to transform it, to move on from it, to where your trial becomes a triumph and you're not stuck in it anymore and dwelling on it, but rather you use it as an asset for you. Because a lot of the traumas and the things we've been to that are difficult, if they're healed and transformed, they get to become an asset for you. They become a strength as opposed to a weight. Yeah, most of my clients do it. And it's fun. It actually sounds crazy to say that it's fun. It's not easy to want to go back to the past and things, but we're not reliving it. We're taking control of it. It's a big difference.
Big difference.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. And I love the fact that you said it's fun. I was going to ask you that question. I was going to ask, what do you enjoy about being a personal brand coach? What's your favorite thing?
I like, so many things about it, but I would say that I've often looked at it is when people come to me at first, they're like a caterpillar. They know they can be a butterfly. That's such a different reality than, butterflies are beautiful and they flutter and everybody sees them and they're like, oh my gosh, look at those beautiful wings and they're so dainty and they're so beautiful. And there's some weird looking caterpillars out there that are kind of cool and stuff, but most caterpillars are not the most, amazing looking creatures, And so they come in and it's essentially the idea. And so when they come to me, what I provide for them is really kind of the safe environment. It's the cocoon phase where they can come with their idea, whether it's a business venture or a new idea that they want to put out. I want to be a keynote speaker, or I want to be a TV presenter, or whatever it is. And they need help. They don't know what to do. And so I guide them in where to go, because I pull out I say I'm kind of like a Swiss Army knife. What tool do we need to pull out today? So I like seeing that the idea birthed in their mind and then going from there into reality. And usually by the time they're fluttering off and doing their thing, they're ready. They don't need me anymore. But sometimes they'll come back when they need a new strategy or a new kind of facet to what they're doing. But we can go the marketing route, we can go the legal route, we can go the financial route, we can go the business plan route, we can go how do you dress, we can go so many directions. And so a lot of my clients will stick with me for a very, very long time throughout their journey.
Very cool. So for you, it's that part of seeing, here's this person or this client and changing them, not changing them, but them changing them, them growing, I guess, into who they are.
Turning into who they are meant to be. I love it. I mean, I can't tell you how many people I've had who are in meetings with me and they're crying because they're just like, it's real now. It's not just an idea. It's a reality. The founder of the nonprofit I was involved with for many, many years, he's passed away now. He always used to say, vision without commitment is a fantasy. Okay. And it just is. Well, a lot of people live in fantasy world and they don't want to. They want to have the reality, but it's hard when there's so many things. I think business has changed so much for so many. We have AI and we got social media and we got all these new technologies and there's all these new regulations and compliance things that need to be done, insurance and this and the other. And there's just so, copyright stuff. And there's just so many things you have to think of that it's almost overwhelming to think of starting a business, because you have to hire a lawyer, you have to go hire a marketing person, then you go hire a maybe a consultant for business, and then go take out a business loan, and you're engaging and interacting with like 6 or 7 different entities. Well, what if you just went to one stop? What if you went to one place? And I'm not a master of the marketing, yes, and personal branding, but I'm not an attorney. I'm not any, but I've worked with enough businesses at this point, 400 plus at this point in the last 4 years, to where I've seen these patterns, right? And I've worked in like 30 types of different industries doing marketing, like umbrella industries. So I know enough to be dangerous, and then I know enough to know when what they need is beyond me, and I have connections for that. So it's fun. I have a lot of fun with what I get to do. Beyond that, though, I mean, like, I love seeing human potential realized, because on the flip side of the vision without commitment is fantasy, commitment without vision is frustration. And so how many people are doing a job or doing a thing that they don't love doing, but they're doing it because they kind of have to. They're kind of stuck in it, because what are you going to do? Especially as you get older and you have to do a career change. You're like, am I really going to do another career change? Like, it's a lot.
Right.
And you have a family to feed, and bills to pay, and a mortgage, and loans to pay down, and whatever else. So there's a lot of risk involved. And so sometimes people need some assurance that they got their back. Someone's got their back. And so, in a weird way, even though I'm in the business sector now, my values are still very much aligned in the same ones as I had when I was in the nonprofit realm, which was value the individual, love your neighbor, and help them accomplish what they are designed to be. And so that's what I do imperfectly. And I have people who help me too. I think every coach should have coaches. I need to grow and evolve too. So, yeah.
I love that. That's great. So you had cancer twice. You've had, the struggles with that. What would you say facing you now, current time? What's the challenges you face now?
The challenge I think I face right now, in the one I'm learning to do better, is to take care of myself, because I can get very busy, very full days. I'm also a keynote speaker. I do keynote speaking, and I'm part owner of a couple other companies, and I keep busy. I've been making it a priority for me every morning, no matter what. I get up early. I'm up at 4:30 every morning. I go to the gym, or I go for a walk. Pitch dark out, hour and a half before I do anything else. I'm not on my phone. I'm not on my device. I do that. That really helps me set my day. In a normal evening, I come home. I make dinner with my family. We have dinner, and we'll maybe do something after that. The weekends, I usually try to take some time off with the kids. But it's having that kind of harmony in the family, harmony in my personal life, that's been really important, because for a long time there, my trauma as a child, because I had some, which we won't go into all of that in this podcast, but my trauma I coped by working. I coped by working very hard and keeping really, really busy, because as long as I was busy, I didn't have to think about what happened as a child, and that served me well for a long time, until it didn't, when my body kept shutting down on me and saying, you're overworking yourself and you're going to be sick. And so I'm trying to keep that. That's my biggest challenge. My other challenge is I want to, so when we think about adventure, right? I think the biggest adventure out there we can get is when we try to accomplish our goals and dreams, right? So ultimately, you're trying to do something that you're believing is going to be exciting and passionate, and whatever. And so the keynote speaking realm for me is my newest challenge. I was challenged by a lot of people saying, you need to be doing public speaking. You're very, eloquent. You speak well. You have a story that's unique. You need to write a book. So this July, I'm going to start writing a book about my life. That's a challenge. And the keynote speaking space, even just today, I announced publicly on social media that I'm doing that. I have a speaker's reel out, and that's a whole new adventure I'm going to go dive into. And my intention with that is to be able to travel the world with my family and speak at events and challenge people and inspire people and motivate them. But then on the side of that, if I get, for example, I might have a speaking engagement in India. Then I'll go to India, do the speaking engagement thing, but then we'll go and we'll volunteer at a local nonprofit for like a week in India. And I'll meet business connections and try to connect and network them. And so I haven't traveled a lot in the last, I've traveled a little bit, but not much, not internationally, not since the pandemic. I think I've been to Panama twice and then maybe a couple states in the US, which is really rare for me. I traveled a lot before that. I want to get back into traveling. I want to get back into the adventure component. I'm looking into speaking agents in Africa, in Asia. And the idea is to create an adventure for my kids while making a difference, while making money too.
Yeah, it all out.
Which has meant I have to turn down a lot of other things. So I've
sure.
since walked away from some of the other businesses I was involved in. My marketing agency, I've pared down some of the services. We're still doing the major ones, but some of the other ones we're just outsourcing and partnering with other people. So my time was freed up. So I could dedicate to doing podcasts and dedicate to doing keynote speaking and dedicating most of my time to writing a book. So I think that's the adventure that I'm looking for upcoming. And ultimately, I want to have enough means financially to where I can know a need that's happening in some part of the world, go there myself, see that it's real, invest in a reliable person to help it be sustainable, and see communities developed, lives changed, and make a difference. But I want to do it from the point of abundance, not scarcity. So
Love it. No, that's great. I appreciate that. This has been fun. I've learned a lot from you. It's great. I'm so glad I had you on. Where can people find you if someone's like, hey, I need a personal brand coach, or I need a keynote speaker for my conference, or whatever the case may be? Where can people find you?
So it's pretty easy. It's David Allen Tracy. And it's David Allen is ALLEN. Tracy is TRACY. There's no E in my name. Go to davidallentracy.com for my website. My Instagram is David Allen Tracy. My LinkedIn is David Allen Tracy. My Facebook is David Allen Tracy. It's all David Allen Tracy. My YouTube channel. So all of it's easy. You can find me there. If you're in any doubt, David Allen Tracy, personal brand coach or motivational speaker, you'll find me. So my website has a ton of information on what I do, from the theta healing component to the personal branding, to personal styling, to marketing, as well as my keynote speaking. I also have a membership hub for weekly workshops, like a mastermind. So every week we have a different speaker come in who speaks on something related to marketing, personal branding, or wellness. So we have celebrity stylists speaking on styling, or the makeup artist for Susan Sarandon's makeup speaking. And we have marketing lead generation companies and authors and keynote speakers and coaches and people who've done it well, who are speaking. They speak for an hour. We have 2 lives on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And then we have all of our recorded versions in the resource library. It's only $19 a month for 8 workshops plus a bunch of discounts. But your listeners are going to be offered a code for their first month free if they want to try it out. And if you don't like it, you can unsubscribe. But it's Be My Guest 2024 is the code. And we'll provide the links as well. So
perfect. Yeah, I'll put those in the show notes. Be My Guest 2024. Perfect.
Yeah. And it's called the
Thank you for offering
Collective, and it's in my website.
Beautiful. Love that. Thank you for offering that. And so just to wrap us up here, for David Allen Tracy, what does adventure mean to you?
Adventure means, that's a good question. So the name adventure, from the etymological standpoint, means to go on a venture. It's to venture forward. It's a momentum thing. It's a going forward. It's taking that leap. So I would say that to me, adventure means being willing to take risk, being willing to just do it. How often do we not just do something? I would have been in the marketing world had I not been willing to take that risk with this business owner who recruited me. I was on the fence about it, and I thought, you know what, I'm just going to do it. So I did it, and here I am.
I love it. Just moving forward, just do it. That's great. David Allen Tracy, thank you so much for coming on Journey with Jake.
Absolutely. I really appreciate it. It's been so much fun.
Thank you so much to my guest, David Allen Tracy, for sharing his journey with us and what he does as a personal brand coach. As David mentioned, you can get access to his Brand Masters Collective monthly membership by using the code BeMyGuest 2024. Just go to his website, davidallentracy.com, to sign up. Thank you, David, for offering that as well. What a great benefit. Thanks to each and every one of you for listening to Journey with Jake each week. It means a lot to me that you find benefit from the journey and adventures of others. As long as it keeps providing a benefit, I will keep doing this. I love doing this, which makes it easy to do. Next week on the show, I have Marcus Higgs, who has spent some time as an English teacher overseas, but is really focusing on helping support parents of preteens in navigating that tough part of life. This was another great episode that you will love. Thanks again for listening to the show. Just remember, it's not about the destination as it is about the journey. Take care, everybody.